everybody, and welcome to this much-awaited evening. We were all looking forward to this.
Thank you.
And after reading the book, I must tell you, you must read the book. So I'm not gonna disclose all the special stories in the books that you go back and read it later. I'm only gonna touch them to build enough suspense to excite you. Jayaji, when I read your book, there's a person you know, there's a person, the TV tells you, here is a successful politician, here is Jayaji, and here are her accomplishments, and here is a story. And then there's a person that the book tells you. And I was amazed to learn about this person that the book told me about. And there are these two passages I must read. It's from the prologue. My story is therefore not about me, but just an example of what a woman in India amid politics and public life and its many faceted experiences in trying to keep her integrity and humanity intact. And again, in the same prologue you write, memoirs are usually written when a feeling of retirement sets in. However, when there's no pause in the many aspects of one's work that covers decades, and when some battles are yet to be fought and won, a memoir just becomes just another layer of activism in the palimpsest of life. So that's how I begin. What prompted you to write this book now?
Well, it's not really been written now. You can say it's completed now. I started thinking about writing something when I was going through those tail casting operation episodes. It was so convoluted. It was so crooked and intriguing and mysterious, and there were layers and layers of small and big conspiracies involved, and so many people leading off various threads of what I was discovering, that I thought it would make a fantastic mystery story, like a detective novel. So I mused about this to a editor friend, and I said I'd love to write this, except nobody would believe it if I said it was true, so maybe I should just make it a fictional detective story. So she said, no, people are curious to know why somebody with your background would be sitting in dark rooms confabulating with defense dealers. And I thought, gosh, if that's the image of me, then maybe they need to know what I really am. But I always hesitated to talk about myself, and always talked about general understanding of life or the nature of people. But I suppose if I have to explain that real incident within the context of my life, then I'll have to do that. So I started writing, but I decided it would not be about I did this and I did that and I went here and there. But when I was doing all those things, what was the life around me? What were the cultural, social, historical situations around? And how does one connect that to today and learn from it? So it was not about me, but about life as it was around me, which should have some lasting interest. So that's how I started it, and what the publisher called the benign chapters, where there are no scorpions involved, those were written. And then I got into a bit of a mess, because there were those court cases and the CBI and the Commission of Inquiry and George Fernandez's illness, where at one point I was coping with alone. It was all too much for me. So I gave up two things. One was exercising, and the other was writing this. So it kind of came to a halt till a year and a half ago. The publisher came to me and said, ma'am, you have to write this story. And every time he would gently persuade by sitting and just chatting. And I would bring out a few more stories during our conversations, like I think we've done inside. And I suppose that when you live a life long enough, there are millions of stories you can tell. So that's how it came out. He said, you have to write about all these things. And then he sat on my head, made a list, and said, this week you will finish this chapter. make a list of the chapters. So he was like a school teacher, and I managed to race against time and finish it last year in August.
So, something I did not know about you is that you were Malabari and you're Malayali before I read the book. I don't know how many else in the audience knows this. And the book was a huge revelation because there were so many things about childhood that resonated, about the culture. So this is a question from one Malabari to another, from girl to girl. You know, you have an entire chapter on your Malabar upbringing. In fact, two. There's the one on Malabar and the one before it. Those two chapters, growing up in Kerala, the rituals, Marumakadayan, matrilineal, ideas that you write about, memories of being a powerful woman, being in a space where it was okay to be a woman and you had a power space. So how was it when a person who's experienced that liberation and that power came to live in a place like New Delhi or the north of India, where gender is probably not understood in the same way? The power structures are not the same. Definitely not matrilineal or matriarchal or not that lineage. How was it? How was it? Was there a struggle? Was there a struggle with the self?
When I came back from Smith College and living abroad, I actually didn't come to Delhi. I went straight to Kashmir, where the patriarchy business was even stronger. This is better? There, for instance, as I've described, where as a junior officer's wife in the IAS, we were all shepherded into one room where the women were supposed to eat, and that too after the men have eaten, and whatever was left in the dungas would be given to us, and then we would eat. And then we'd be told, okay, now Saab is ready to leave, and we'd go out and meet up outside. My husband and his colleagues used to go for walks in the evening, and I was not supposed to walk with them. They played badminton, I was not supposed to do that. If at all I was wanting to be out, I could take my dog for a walk alone. So that's the kind of life I landed up in. But having had a Smith College education for which I am ever grateful, it gave me a kind of mind that was always wanting to explore and understand and enjoy and take in whatever was around me. So I think from then I started looking at all these things again as social and cultural and whatever those situations were, they were not personal. So I didn't understand about it.
We discussed this also, the fact that you look at things from above, to be able to get you have a broader perspective. Most people don't. Most people live it and deal with it in the minute. But it still doesn't take away the fact that you're different and you stand out and you're dealing with people who are not so different, you know? They believe in these systems, they believe in patriarchy, they believe in more equality for men and less equality for women. So how do you deal with the practicality of it? The interplay of it in real life, you know?
I guess I push as far as I can go, like any naughty child. Push the envelope and see how far you can push your parents into not frowning at you or giving you a smack. I think all of us who feel confident about ourselves should do that. And I don't see why it should hold us back. And as this book will show, I've pushed the envelope quite a lot, both within my family, outside among my friends, in politics, and perhaps even writing this book. Because as far as I've understood, not many women who've been in politics so long have actually written about it, because they still keep tied to their ideologies and their parties. But I feel that if you believe in a true ideology, it should be valid whether you're in a party or not. And if socialism or matrilineal lifestyle or equality or feminism, all these things should make you feel equal and confident, and that's the way you're going to live your life and define it. And others just have to lump it.
You also write about the Taravada at Kollangoda, which is very close to Trivandrum. It's part of the district, is it? Or?
Yeah, well, lots of Tarwats in Malabar.
So you went back there when it became a heritage resort. And there was a time when they were breaking it away, and you write very painfully about how the Taravada was broken. And there's this bit I'd like to read. It seems ironic that many people will now be paying a lot of money to have luxurious oil massages and baths that we used to have for free years ago. It seems as if heritage is worth preserving only if there is money in it for everyone. So why I ask this is later you have become a pioneer, somebody who heralded the idea of preservation of Indian crafts and Indian art and artisans and tradition, the tradition of art and craft. So did this incident, did the breaking of the Taravada, losing that, did it have anything to do with it? Were there inspirations from
No,
those?
I don't think so. I didn't quite connect that. I felt the beauty of the family architecture, the value that was there was in itself. As part of generally preserving parts of our heritage that we have, but the first time actually made me conscious of the fact maybe that was what was connecting me to crafts as well. But in crafts, as in any other form of heritage or traditional ideas or arts, there is, I've realized, working with craftspeople for now 45 years all across the country in many, many different kinds of craft skills, that there is a ethical and value system which they imbibe. Even a non-literate craftsperson will imbibe from the stories of their culture. Whether it's tribal groups, why they group, why they wear a particular color and a particular festival, why they all dance in a certain way, why their paintings are all in a particular style, why something is made somewhere and not somewhere else. The culture could be geographic, it could be climate, it could be history, it could be influences of other movements around, but they all carry a history, a cultural history. And unless we understand that cultural history, we can't understand ourselves as a society. Today I was just telling Nadia that it upsets me that a group of intellectuals in Delhi can sit and define the country, decide what the country feels, what the nation wants to know or not know. Any of that does not come from sitting in drawing rooms and seminars. It comes from living with people who are completely different across the country. But there is something that holds them together, which is an ancient shared culture. And I keep telling fashion designers and architects and others that the only way you can make a place for yourself in the world is to be Indian, take from the best of that, and then contemporize it for today. Otherwise, you're just being imitated. And the kind of value systems we have about family, about community sharing, about doing some things which you don't do otherwise. For instance, did you all know that when you're making a sculpture or a painting, usually it's about the gods and so on, but whatever it may be, they will put the eye in last. The eye will be painted in last or carved last, because they say everything is a sacred act. Doesn't have to be to any particular god or religion even, but it's a sacred act where you're giving of yourself, and some hand, divine hand, is moving your hand towards that excellence. So the eye is made last so that when the figure is complete, that divinity then comes in through the eye and resides in that statue or in that painting. That gives the statue or painting that value. And I feel these are beautiful things to know and to appreciate. Otherwise we look at something, oh gosh, it's only old Ramayans and old something, and we find cockeyed abstract painting, which may of course be beautiful, but it really has no meaning except for the artist. Sometimes you really don't even know what they're conveying. That has its place, I'm not deriding it. But we should not push our own things aside for that.
So, your mother sent you to learn piano, and you wanted to learn Kathakali. And you write, so we shifted from Bapanagar to Humayun Road, where my mother hired a piano for me to learn. I hated it. I wanted to learn Kathakali instead, but did not dare insist upon my wishes. So that's different from the Jaya we know, somebody who insists upon her wishes. So was there a different relationship that you shared with your mother where you would not?
I think so. That was quite soon after my father passed away, and my mother took it very badly. And I remember always being told at the age of 13 that I must look after my mother now. It was not people telling my mother she must look after me. So somehow this adulthood was thrust on me very quickly because my mother was more emotional or hysterical or up and down in her reactions than I have ever been. So I didn't want to upset her or offend her in any way. So I was very careful in thinking about what I should defy her about. And actually the important things in life, she was really liberal and easy. For instance, when I was to get married, she always said there are lots of proposals coming from you from Kerala and here and there, but I tell everybody I will not interfere in who you marry, because if that doesn't work, if I tell you who to marry and it doesn't work, you will blame me as well as the guy. But if you choose yours and it doesn't work, at least I'm there for you. I think that was a wonderful thing to say 40 years ago. And she has been liberal like that. But piano, no.
You've had a very unique childhood, a very unique upbringing. Your father was a civil services officer, and you traveled the world. You started traveling the world from a very young age, from India, Kerala, Rangoon, Tokyo, the United States, Brussels. So it's a world, and London, moved in so many different places, and the influence of your father. But you lost your father when you were really young. You lost your father when you were 13. And that changed your life. And you write about it in the book. You write about it in a manner that made me think, how could you not break? I mean it. There's this paragraph you wrote, by 1957, my mother had taken up the post of social secretary to the American ambassador elsewhere at Bunker as a means of getting her mind off the tragedy of my father's death. This is the first time in her life that she had ever worked in an office for a salary. We both adjusted to our new circumstances in our ways. My mother tearfully, but courageously, and I silently, occasionally. I shed a few tears too on my pillow at night when my mother was asleep. I wondered how life had taken me so suddenly from elegant mansions and vast manicured lawns with tennis courts to a single room where, to escape from the summer heat, I had to set a block of ice in a vessel and place it between me and a table fan. In the early days of my life, I never experienced the presence of an air cooler, an air conditioner. An air conditioner entered my home only when my son presented me with one 43 years later. So I'm thinking about that child, the 13-year-old, who suddenly had to shift, experience a paradigm shift, but also shift physically, mentally, emotionally into a world that you'd probably not experienced a world like that before. Where did you find the grit? Because you also had to parent your mother.
I think children are far more resilient than we think. And maybe we don't give them enough credit for that. Most things in life, as you might discover in the book, if you face it, you've got to face it. And you can't crumble. If you have to face it, you have no choice. You might as well hold your head up and tackle it the best you can. And I had so much also that was fun. I had friends who would cycle with me to Khan Market. I would have friends spending the night where we would both laugh over having that fan blowing over a chunk of ice while we listened to some radio program of, those Dates with You and certain things that used to be in those days, no television. And so there was lots that we could laugh about, and that's, I think, the resilience of a child. And those are the kind of things that perhaps teach us to be resilient later. Later we're more conscious of it, and earlier we're not.
You went to Smith College, a fantastic college, a college from where many writers were born. I don't know if you went, at the time when you went to the college, you wanted to be a writer or not, or was it?
No, I hadn't thought about it, although I used to enjoy writing all my essays and I used to get good marks for it. And I always found it very easy to write. Even in senior Cambridge, as it used to be in those days, I always got an A for my essay writing and all my English subjects. So I loved doing it, but I never thought about it as a past. Even now, it's not a career. I don't call myself a writer.
To write about Smith College is that it was at Smith that my sense of public activism first blossomed. The Chinese had attacked India in 1962. We were at war back home, and our soldiers were getting killed. Without any prompting from anyone, I decided to collect money from the Jawan's Welfare Fund, or whatever it was called in those days. I wrote to the Indian Embassy asking to be sent a full-length Indian feature film, Satyajit Ray's Devi. So, did you know at that time it was activism?
No, I didn't. I suppose at Smith everyone did what they wanted to do, and most things that we were guided to do were very good and useful things. I didn't think I was being particularly patriotic. I just felt like doing it, and I think, fortunately or unfortunately, that's how I've lived my life. I just do what I feel like. Hope it turns out okay.
And it's not funny that the things that felt so normal to you at that time, and the things that were so regular to your being, is somehow today an act of courage. And you know why I say this? Because I'm going to pick this incident from your book about, this is during the partition, and your parents had Muslim friends, and it was in a house like the one described above on Tughlaq Road that my mother and father hid their Muslim friends till they could arrange safe travel for them to Lahore during the terrible days of partition. So here was something that was really normal for you to help your Muslim friends, the family to help their Muslim friends. Also for you to take action for the Javans. It was so normal, but today is an act of bravado. Have times changed? Have ideologies changed? What has really happened? Have people inherited a different set of values in recent times?
Well, I think there's much of the same going on, but we are more self-conscious about it now. There are more ways of putting oneself out there where you want the whole world to know and see and acknowledge. I think Facebook is a typical example. I cannot understand why people want to post pictures of themselves every day and what they're eating and what sunset they're seeing. Particularly for somebody like me who's been so much in the public eye, I'm very happy not to be in the public eye. And I don't know, I think it's just, now you do something good and you'll tell the whole world on Twitter, see, I did this and that, and this is what I've written about, or, whatever it is. Maybe that's a good thing because you can share and reach out to more people, but we did these things because we believed in them. And we didn't want anyone to cheer us. We just felt good doing it because that's what moved us.
While Ashokji, your ex-husband, and you, he went to Cambridge and he was a contemporary. Well, you were there at the same time Rajiv Gandhi was also studying there. And you write very briefly about how the relationship between Rajiv Gandhi and Sonia was perceived by friends.
Little rude, sorry to say.
I was hoping you would share that in your own words.
Well, in those days, English girls were very typically looked at or thought about as people being very bookish and having thick spectacles and thick ankles. not pretty so on, and maybe only good for serious academic discussions. And the foreign students who were not, Sonia Gandhi was not a student at Cambridge, she was a language au pair, which is perfectly respectable. I don't think one should undermine that position, but she was working for a family, looking after their children in an atmosphere where she could learn English. And these foreign students were always considered more attractive. So among the snooty Indians and other students in Cambridge, they used to say that these foreign students didn't know English very well, and of course Indians, we think we know brilliant English. So they said we don't need to talk to these girls because there are other things on our mind. For serious intellectual conversation, you talk to the English girl, and for fun, you talk to the foreigner.
Now that's the other side of it. The other side that you've had to bear with in politics and in public life. And many women in India have to bear with both in their personal and professional life. The wrath of being intelligent. So, a friend once said that it's what's more difficult than being a woman is being an intelligent woman. And I believe we had this discussion earlier about how in the political environment that you were in, especially working with politicians from Bihar, Nitish and Lalu, how they perceived the place and the space of an Indian woman in politics, especially an intelligent woman in politics. What's your story on that? What is your...
Well, I think a woman was a bit painful enough for them to bear, but an intelligent woman was not at all nice. The reason being that it's not self-praise on the behalf of women to say this, but women who were educated, who could speak and write in Hindi and English, were at that stage in our social and political history, which means the rise of the upward mobility of the backward classes, the whole Mandal movement, everything became, unfortunately, about caste. So, socialists like Ram Manohar Lohia, Madhu Limai, George Fernandez, who put a lot of value to writing, even Gandhi, I mean, he used to write wonderful things in the back of envelopes. Writing letters, Nehru, Gandhi, all these people, it was so valuable, anything they wrote, and they put their thoughts down at every occasion. And the socialists as socialists did that. But once the Mandal thing came along, a lot of the socialists felt that they had not also had the benefit of a good education, so they undermined education. It was easy to get votes in the name of caste. Many socialists, like Sharad Yadav, got up at big public meetings and said, all these years I used to be a socialist, but now I'm a Yadav. And it was on the Yadav or the whatever vote, the caste vote, especially UP and Bihar, that this came up. And then a woman or a man, we were the socialists who could read and write, who were always asked to draft the political resolution, the economic resolution, likha padi wala kaam. So that likha padi for us became, for them they used this word against us, buddhijeevi log. So buddhijeevi, which is supposed to be intellectual, height of intellectual, anybody who could read and write and speak. Lawyers were considered buddhijeevis, whether they were good lawyers or articulate or not. Anyone who was a teacher, lecturer, anyone who could read and write became a buddhijeevi to be set aside because caste was the way to get ahead.
The shame of being a buddhijeevi. You know, if you ever consider writing a fiction or another book, I want to suggest one, The Journeys of Jaya. Because all the different places that you've traveled to. But you write distinctly about Kashmir, my state of Kashmir, through war, darkness, and light. I want you to tell us about the war, the darkness, and the light.
Kashmir is one of those beautiful and sad places that keep going up and down. When we arrived in Kashmir, it was 1965. Electricity was very bad. Every evening when everyone's lights went on, everyone's lights dimmed. You could barely read. And everything in every shop was dusty. And as I said, no one was allowed to go walking around anywhere if you were a woman alone or whatever, even in groups. So it was quite grim. And on top of that, immediately about a month or two after we reached there, the first India-Pakistan war happened. Right there in Anantnag while we were up at Amarnath at the Yatra. So that was our first experience. We had to come down from the Yatra and block up all our windows, blacking out everything, and nobody would go out and all that. We could hear firing in the distance. So that was, it was grim, but it was in a way, again, as I would say, an experience. And so it was exciting. As you would all perhaps know, if you're in the heart of a storm, you don't feel as scared as somebody who's hearing about it from outside. So it always sounds worse than it is. But anyway, so that was a time where I was not allowed to be out of the room much. There was no water in the bathroom tap, so I just have to walk to the end of the garden, fill a bucket of water, come and wash the clothes. And the men around the Malis and all would never even carry the bucket for you. So that was the kind of life which I was there. And the Kashmiris themselves lived very isolated lives and troubled lives, because till then all the elections also were rigged. So everyone felt oppressed. And from that slowly we grew, we lived on through times when Sheikh Abdullah was released and there was big joy and everything opened up and the tourism thing started and lots of things happened. And then again while we were in Ladakh, and it was fascinating being in Punch right on the border. So even again it was tough, because when we'd walk outside, the soldiers up on the hills would say, we can see you with our binoculars down there walking. Their bunkers used to be opposite each other. So, but it was quite fascinating. I think again, everything was like a new story all around us. And in Ladakh, again, the second war, and there the aircraft stopped. For 12 days of that war, there was no aircraft coming in which usually brought the bread and the newspapers from Chandigarh, because they were all converted into bombers, which they were. So, for all that time, we didn't have any news or bread. So this was the kind of life we led, when you had to boil an egg before you could fry it because it had frozen inside. But these are fantastic experiences when you look back. How many of you can say that when you put a mug down on the wash basin, it would stick there and freeze, and you have to yank it off again? I mean, why do you all need a comfortable life to enjoy life? I think all these things are fun to learn about.
At that point, you were not a politician. You were an IAS officer's wife. Did Kashmir trigger any bit of politician that was yet to come?
Well, we somehow were very close to Sheikh Abdullah and Farooq Abdullah. Sheikh Abdullah was far senior and we respected him for his stature. When Farooq Abdullah was elected, he was very, as now, happy-go-lucky, chalo bhai, saath mein chalo type, and sometimes he would pull me into a jeep and say, come, we'll go to the next village. And it was odd because, again, I was an IAS officer's wife and he shouldn't have been doing that. Maybe I shouldn't have been doing that, but I don't think he or I have ever done things that we only should have. So, and when he had that victory thing, we all, lots of his friends, including me, we piled into the shikara, which went in a victory procession in the river. So, all kinds of things like that happened, which was fun, but it was not politics for me. When politics came into my mind was when the emergency came and we were still in Kashmir. Sheikh Abdullah spoke out against the emergency. He was the first Indian leader to do so. And we kept getting friends from Delhi who would justify the emergency, and we kept getting more and more horrified, because our innate nature was against these kind of anti-democratic things. None of us could say anything because as part of the civil administration, you didn't take a political stand. But it certainly rankled very much. So when the emergency was lifted and the elections came and Indira Gandhi was defeated, we certainly celebrated openly in Srinagar. So that could be the first political act in India that I did, other than the thing in America in college. But I think most people did that and we felt right doing it. After that, we got posted to Delhi and I went back into working in handicrafts and in Gujarat. But what really pushed me in was the 1984 attack against the Sikhs, which quite changed my life in the world of politics.
I think it was Mark Tully who in his review said that you joined politics and that's when the Congress Party slipped down. And then it's when the Congress Party took off again when you retired from politics. But you have always opposed the idea of dynasty politics. And you do so being the way you are, fearlessly, and who, it's a belief, it's what you believe and you speak about it. And this in a country where the Congress has remained a large mainstream national party for years, and many people in the party is afraid to say that we don't believe in dynasty. So when you speak about it, that you're against this idea of dynasty party, what else do you see of the Congress Party as a party? What is it? What are the other things that you stand against the Congress Party? And
well, I would say again, the emergency was one terrible thing. We believed that India was a democracy which was going to get more and more democratic, more and more civilized, more and more modern. And the emergency just clamped down on everything. Whether it was the opposition getting locked up, the media getting closed down, and the horrific things that were not just stories. And I thought that somebody who was the daughter of Nehru, to do such a thing when our freedom was so hard won that it was an unforgivable thing to do, to change the constitution, to meddle with the judges. Even today, I think that's probably the worst political act. Riots and slaughter happen in every civilization all the time, and each one is bad. But this kind of thing is not right, for a very mild word to use, in a country that valued its freedom so much and that fought for it non-violently, and has a value system that Gandhi and others gave us, which we share with the rest of the world very proudly. And then to knock it off overnight for some petty egotistical situation is still today for me unforgivable. And unfortunately, I don't think the Congress has fully realized or apologized openly and honestly enough for that. They keep very easily saying, if something happens today, oh, it's like the emergency, or it's worse than the emergency. They should be ashamed of even mentioning the emergency without first atoning for it. So that's one thing. Dynasty is also anti-democracy, anti-democratic. As it is, we live, and I've lived in parties where claims to be democratic, but internal functionings are not. Nitish Kumar, who's a darling of many, hates democratic functioning within a party. Sorry to say this, but that's what we've all seen, and I've lived with it for 15 years of his reactions and actions within the party. And unless people, and even I described the whole VP Singh government and how it came in, even the Janata Party government, when Jayaprakash Narayan was there, why did they not elect a leader? Why did they leave it to JP to decide? And then you decide wrong and the others get disgruntled. If there is a democratic election, there is no right for anybody to be disgruntled. And that, once you sow the seed of disgruntlement because of being undemocratic, then your government is not going to last long. And that's what happened with the Janata Party, that's what happened with VP Singh's government. And maybe that's why Dynasty believes that it's more stable. But it's completely undemocratic, because why? Any party, name Gandhi, name anybody, why do we as citizens have to accept the fact that one family has the right to rule, has the right to all the wisdom, has the right to, a divine right to say, well, we are going to tell you what to do, and we alone will head the government. How can we then call it a democracy? And how can we bring democracy if everyone, good or bad, experienced or not, is supposed to be automatically accepted. I mean, I find it horrifying when people say, okay, if Rahul Gandhi doesn't work, Priyanka is there. Why? Is there nobody else? And when Sonia Gandhi was there, we all used to be very sorry, but say that isn't there an Indian? I'm not sure how Indian she even is today. So these are all things where if you're proud of your freedom and you're proud of the fact that you have thrown away the foreigners and the colonial rule, and some of us remember that, how can you today be expected to forget all that and not hold your head up to be confident enough to say that we are capable as Indians of doing it right?
You said some of us remember that. I read the book and I realized how important Gandhiji has been in your life, and how important the presence of Gandhi, his teaching, his ideas, the time that you'd spend with your mother at the prayer meetings at the Birla House. You said some of us remember it. You know, and I'm saying this because there are many youngsters here. And a lot of times when the idea of Gandhi comes up, it's a context that the youngsters don't understand anymore. Because forget remembering, some of us have not even experienced the idea of Gandhi and the power that he was at that time, and why was he so important in the lives of many people, people like you. Yesterday there was Professor Dinesh Singh speaking about Gandhiji, and he could not stop speaking about Gandhiji. And I kept thinking, why was Gandhiji so important in your lives? It's true that you saw him. It's true that he touched you physically. And we're so distant, we're so far away, and all the children here are so far away from this idea of Gandhi. What do you have to say to them
About this change?
about Gandhiji? What, you know, your own personal journey?
Well, I think there were certain moral values that he stood for. I would also like to put in a caveat saying that Gandhiji was also a consummate politician. He was ultra smart. He knew how to manipulate people, including large crowds. And so all that, he was as much a saint as he was a politician. And a politician today is a bad word, but if universally a politician is a bad word, then he was also bad in parts, if you want to say that. But there was a certain honesty about the morality he spoke about, of his way of living, of his way of thinking, of his way of believing. The fact that he did not want to take a position of power, that he gave up the fancy things of life, and that he was able to truly demonstrate the meaning of satyagraha and of sacrifice for a larger cause. These things done, just speaking about like to be a Mahatma of a saffron-wearing type who just pontificates, he didn't do that. He lived his life like that. He was happy to go to jail, he would fast, he would do everything. And he believed so strongly in non-violence, and I think that's the only way humanity can actually survive, if we don't use violence. And the fact that his words resonate all over the world and don't that much with our youth today, I think is because we tend to adopt sometimes very indiscriminately things that happen in the West. And what's happened in the West is over the last, say, 20, 25 years, is the importance of money above everything else. And therefore success is money, never mind how you attain it. You have your Nirav Modi or whoever else who makes a whole lot of money and runs away. For them, that money was important, morality was not. Why is there so much crookery? Because morality and ethics don't matter so much, because your real measure of success today, unfortunately in a lot of society, is what car you have, what home you have, how much you can flash about. And this also comes from this loss of community spirit, sharing, helping, and compassion, but riding over somebody else to get where you want to go. Whether it's going through a red light or overtaking from the wrong way, to cheating somebody or something, the lack of morality in one's life, and I wouldn't say that it's entirely like that in the West. There are very important political philosophers and economists in the West today who are talking about decisions in economics and public life which have no meaning unless there is a moral underpinning. And I think unless humanity as a whole thinks about some basic issues of morality, there are some things you just cannot do. And if you start measuring everything by money, you lose sight of that. And probably that's why, because Gandhi had nothing to do and no interest in money, that he is getting forgotten today, although we put him on all our notes.
The Samata Party. You were the president of the Samata Party. What did Samata mean for you when you coined the term, when you formed the Samata?
Samata is equality, egalitarianism, a balance and equality in society. And that it meant therefore more, that for me it encompasses everything, whether it's economic or gender or anything. A large nation and a full nation, big, small nation must have an equal voice on international platforms. Anything that you can do to bring about at least equal opportunity. It's not like communism where everybody works and then everybody shares the outcome. But you at least must have an opportunity equal to somebody else in education or in possibilities of working. So that's what it really meant, Samata, as against Janta or Janata, which means people, but what kind of people and what kind of society is not conveyed.
So what were your best days with the Samata Party and what were your worst days?
The best days were after a long struggle against Lalu Yadav's corruption and casteism, when we managed to have an alliance with the BJP in Bihar and have a very successful election outcome without any religious overtones or any Hindutva overtones, and nobody encroached into other people's territories. We worked as one, and what we realized was the opposition, unless they get together, you can never defeat anybody. And at that time, although the communists and the BJP and the Congress and everybody who was against Lalu, everyone was very careful and didn't want to combine. So we were the only ones out there up front who fought it alone 2 elections and failed miserably. And we decided that the only way we can really keep going is to have an alliance. So that's what we did, and our big achievement was to ensure that Lalu Yadav got less seats in parliament, and so he did not become the Prime Minister. Devegowda did for a short while. He was already appointing various people. This will be my home minister, that will be so-and-so. So
The country can wait for that to not happen. So, but also, once you were in the government, and once what you said, you don't think of it as success, but somebody used the term success. But what people deemed to be the success of the Samata Party being part of the alliance, and George Sahab being the defense minister, and you being a very important part of the ruling government, and that's when the whole storm. The storm hit, the Tehelka scandal and the allegations of bribery and corruption. Do you think it's success that made you so vulnerable?
not success. It was the impression people had that I had power or I was close to power. So I'll have to clarify here that I wasn't in government, the party was. I was the general secretary at first and then the president, but that was not important. As the spokesperson, I spoke up a lot to defend the NDA and the Samata Party, so I became very visible because the television channels also had expanded by then. And suddenly you are seen all over the country, otherwise you've been there all along doing and saying the same thing, but nobody knows. All of a sudden everybody knows you because you're on television, and I think they started at the beginning saying everyone has a different idea. If you're on television speaking about the party or anything which they think is important, they think you are very important. And they think you're a big celebrity and a star, not realizing that I traveled alone by train, I drove my own car, I didn't have a driver, and whoever was accompanying me mostly in my car was my dog whom I would take to work every day. So people used to say, but you're the president of the party, you don't have any guards, and I would laugh. I said, George Fernandez doesn't have guards. Where on earth will I need guards? And our party can't even afford a telephone bill every month, let alone guards. So these are things people don't believe. They think you're on TV, so you must be rich and powerful and glamorous and everything else. And during that time, when you're perceived to have power, people have a lot of expectations. Because unfortunately, we are a bhaibandi, hum aapke liye kaam kara denge kind of society. You feel you can't get something done, you have to stand in line. Somebody has a cousin or a brother-in-law. You just have to pick up the phone and ask a favor. So in this kind of thing, in Delhi particularly, there are a whole tribe of wheeler dealers who are perpetually doing something for somebody else in terms of favors using the power structure. So people would come and ask me to have their children pass in an interview, a railway interview, when they hadn't got high marks in the exam. And I would say, but you didn't get top marks in the exam. Maybe you're called for the interview, but how can I tell them to pass? Nahi, aur party karte hain. Can you not make my cousin a committee member of such and such? Can you not dilwao me an extra gas coupon? All these favors that people would ask for, if you believed in doing the right thing, you would refuse to help them. So then you make enemies. If you have people who are not anywhere near you, but they think you're near the defense minister, all politicians are corrupt, all defense deals have got huge money that passes hand, so you must be a channel or a receiver, presumed. So that's what happens, and you become the subject of expectation or attack if you don't fulfill those expectations.
So when the scandal broke, George Sahab wanted to resign. You didn't want to resign, but you had to. Why did you have to?
It was all very odd. I think we all got caught up in a net together. There was Bangaru Lakshman, whom the party said to resign, so he resigned. George Saab offered his resignation the very same evening, and for 4 days the Prime Minister said no. Nobody asked me at that time to resign. My party asked me to resign. I said, what on earth are you saying? You know that I have not taken a rupee from anyone in these 15, 20 years I've been with you all. Why on earth should I resign? Resigning, I felt, was like, in a way, admitting guilt. Once I get you to resign, you never come back. There's always a kalank against you. So I felt that if you can stand up straight, it was the party's duty to defend me. If those 14 or 15 men and women, or one woman maybe who was an MP, had stood up and said, we all know her personally for these years, let anyone prove she's ever taken a rupee, it would have helped. Other parties, women in other parties, nobody spoke up. That's one thing in our society. Somebody gets into trouble, nobody will stand up. They just dump you and run away, whatever the field. It's presumed that you must have done something wrong, or if you stick by them, then you are probably part of the same gang. So that's why I tried to explain here why I believe that no calling for resignation at every step of anybody is wrong. So that was one thing. But then, as I said, since Bangaru Lakshman had to resign, and after 4 days, because Mamta Banerjee left the government and Vajpayee got scared that the government would go next or they'd ask him to resign, so George Saab was a good scapegoat, so asked him to resign. Now, if they both resign, then my party MPs, 4 of them who were in government, as ministers, said, oh, फिर George Saab के साथ देने के लिए, we'll also resign. So then Vajpayee, very strangely, although maybe he was Prime Minister, but he was nothing in our party, sent word that I should also resign. So it was very curious. I did so because everybody was resigning. I can't sit up there and wave my flag. So I resigned, but I till today not understood how technically that could happen. that a person, a leader from another party should ask the leader of another party to resign.
Yeah, it sounds weird, completely
Maybe
obnoxious.
that's where the women angle comes in. That it's easy to dispense with the woman even if you do it in an odd way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. Do you think it would have played out differently if you were a man? Because these MPs went back and asked for their ministerships.
They didn't go back and ask, they asked George Saab and made him do it. No, but I would say yes, it's easier to get rid of a woman, but I do also must honestly say, I didn't have enough clout. I didn't have a huge base or a caste base that by knocking me out, they would have come to harm. So that base I had never built up. Because my base is, if at all there is a base, it's with craftspeople across the country, which is a casteless and stateless, religionless entity for me. So I would not have used that, and I never did. So I had nothing to offer them that they would lose if I were to stay.
So you may have lost the presidentship party, but when visitors from abroad come to India, they go to the Taj Mahal, and they go to the Red Fort, and they go to Delhi Hut, and you built a monument. I don't think Delhi Hut is anything short of a monument in today's age and time, and such a beautiful tribute, such a powerful institution that you created, powerful, visible institution that you created, but it wasn't easy for you. You had to fight many people.
But I think now looking back, creating Delhi Hut, tussling and fighting and pestering everybody for 6 years was easier than fighting the corruption that's taken over now. I'm still chasing Manish Sisodia, this minister, that minister, every bureaucrat I can find, to say that, look, the success has bred corruption. Traders have taken over, pushing craftspeople out. The Delhi tourism doesn't care who's there as long as they get money over and under the table to cover their losses. And it's becoming a tragedy which I'm fighting. That's why many battles to be still fought and won is what I've opened the book with.
And there are many battles in court. You have to go to court every month. There's a 12-year-long impending court case which refuses to decide for itself what its future will be, when will it stop. It's a long battle. So I was very curious when you wrote Life Among the Scorpions, and it's memoirs of a woman in Indian politics. Are there women scorpions in this talk? Or are they just male scorpions? I have to read this out for all of you to get the context. And once, not too long ago, in 2001, a 24-year-old woman in Kota Baru, Malaysia, emerged from a 2x6-meter glass cage after living with 2,700 poisonous scorpions for 30 days. According to news reports that went around the world, she left the enclosure, which was positioned in the local museum, for just 15 minutes every day to use the bathroom. She survived 7 stings, 2 of them serious. Although she received a certificate from the museum's chairman, acknowledging her as a scorpion queen, she said that one of her best rewards was making some new clawed friends. I am particularly fond of 2 scorpions, and I named one of them Bob. She said, "It would be difficult for me to understand why she performed the stunt." That's what you write. When I read the story, I felt like I was the woman in that glass cage, her every move being watched by everyone outside. There was nothing one could hide. There was nowhere to escape. It was a public act for some intangible reason that was hard to define. Like her, I too made a couple of good friends. One of them could be called George Fernandez. He was not really one of the scorpions, but being among them, he taught me to survive them. So he was not a poisonous scorpion. There were many poisonous scorpions and many non-poisonous scorpions. So again, coming back to the question, where
well, actually the scorpion was because of the Belka sting. Sting is the scorpion. But then when I looked at my life in politics, and there were so many who sting you at some point or the other. So it became a word to imply anyone, which could involve bureaucrats as well. Anyone who got nasty with a woman for doing something supposedly successfully in public life.
When they, I'm sorry, when they take your name, people also tend to talk about George Sala. When I die, I want to be like you. I want to be remembered like you. I want to be remembered that I had a partner who had all the courage in the world to be with a woman who was who she was. You know, so when I talk to you, I talk with envy. For how many
Joseph was a remarkable human being. I don't think he was with me courageously because I'm a woman. He just accepted me as a human being whom he respected. And he had many close friends. And when people ask me what they think are personal questions like, oh, do you love George Fernandez? I say many men do. This is not a situation or a relationship of man-woman. It overrides that and becomes something where men respected him as much, followed him as much, influenced by him as much, and would do anything for him as much. It was just his personality. The fact that I found myself a woman worthy of his inner circle is for me a great compliment to myself, because I respected him. And I think the thing I respected most about him is that he would not do anything special for me, and I would never ask him to do anything special for me, which is what he respected about me. And I think this is a very unusual relationship. The fact that I suffered so much is because he never stuck his neck out to save me from anything. In fact, he pushed me into the ocean and said, now fend for yourself. And that perhaps has made me more understanding, more resilient, more everything, because eventually you realize that you can't always be with some other human being propping you up. And when you are finding yourself alone, you know how to stand straight.
This book is also about George Sala. As Mark Cully rightly said, it's also it's very biographical of his journey as a politician. And you write of him as an admirable politician, of somebody with very high ideals, and somebody who stood for his ideals, who believed in ideals. Like you said, without where the country is engrossed in the idea of caste and religion. Here was a man who was named George Fernandez.
Those days he used to tell me, if my name was Janardhan Fadnavis, I could become a Prime Minister.
so he must have been a very special man. We didn't know him, you knew him. And you write of the very special man that he is, and the very special politician that he is. I would really like you to share some more about it. I don't want to break the climaxes in the book, which is why I'm not going to read about from those chapters. I'd like you to read it. But I would like you to share the power of that politician.
Well, I think the most outstanding qualities which drew me to working with him was, one, his fearlessness. He was not vulnerable, and he never made himself vulnerable. He didn't make himself weak because of another person, or because of money and acquisitions, or because of wanting power. He could attain power, throw it out at a minute's notice. And he never went out of his, never did agree to help anybody, no matter how close, who was wrong, because that person was close to him or her. So, fearlessness, integrity. He never had a bank account of any worth. He doesn't own a home. He never had a car of his own. And he had his 6 kurta pajamas, which some friend would buy for him. If in Calcutta, they would dump him with 2 or 3 kurtas. If in Bombay, some other friend. Sometimes the kurtas would be too long and the pajamas too short. He didn't even look in the mirror to see. And he would wash them himself till he was 75. Every morning, he would wash his khadi kurta pajamas and of course have them ironed. But Lalu Yadav used to love to say in his speeches, जॉर्ज साहब अपना कुर्ता पिजामा धोबी से धुलवाते हैं और उसके बाद आके मिट्टी में मिला के निचोड़ के फिर पहनते हैं. And of course the fancy English speaking media of Delhi used to write and say, imagine on Republic Day he wore the same kurta pajama in the morning as well as at Rashtrapati Bhavan in the evening. Imagine, they would be so concerned about the fact that he didn't change his clothes. And if a minister changed the clothes 3 times, then that would also be wrong. He never pleased the media. But his kindness and humanity was what also drew me to him. He used to tell me stories about when he was in jail, and it was hot summer, and a bird flew in and made a nest on the fan, and had eggs, and the eggs hatched, and one little bird fell off before it could fly. And he used to wear some cap kind of thing in those days. He made a little nest in the cap and kept the bird there till it could fly. So he loved dogs, and he would always, in those days Indian Airlines gave you 2 free toffees. So he would keep these toffees in his pocket on every flight and stay with friends who mostly had dogs. So the dogs would wait for him in the balcony knowing he was coming, and those toffees would go to the dogs. Once, you remember, some of you, the Bhiwandi riots. He wrote me a note saying that here I am in the middle of the town which is gone dead and deserted, and it is so sad that there is a female dog here next to me who has not eaten, and I am so sad that I have nothing to give it. He used to be upset about the human beings and about the dogs, and who would think that? Then he would write to me sometimes from jail and say that I would always like you to be in jail, because that's the only thing now in political struggle you have not done. And then the next morning he would write and say, no, on second thoughts, no. Because when I was in Tihar jail and I saw that woman, Rukhsana Sultana, walked by, and the crude remarks that people made about her, no woman should be in jail, but you must always go and visit a jail and see their conditions there and speak out against it. Things like this, which made him a human being who cared for humanity and was compassionate. And I like that. I like the fearlessness, the integrity, and the human individual compassion. These things are very rare to find in anybody, let alone politicians.
You have experienced losses before. You experienced loss as a child, with the loss of your father, with the loss of a life you had known before your father passed away. But with George Sahab and his Alzheimer's, it was a different loss. George Sahab losing his memory is also you losing his ability to remember you.
Not just me. I think more tragic is the fact that he doesn't know who he is. In the process of a man losing his identity and having to look at photographs of himself and staring, he took around, he used to take there was a biography written by somebody in Kannada. And for days he would carry that book around and look at it all the time, as if to say, I wonder who this person on the cover is it me? That kind of thing. And then slowly to the point of time where he did not know what to do about anything. It's, I think, one of the saddest illnesses anybody can have. And, you know, we talk about cancer, we talk about all these horrible other ailments, but with Alzheimer, I think the people who are actually watching, the caregivers and the family, it's the most horrific thing, because you're perfectly fit as a body and in your health, but your mind is completely shut off. And as I say over here, I saw a documentary once which described it very sadly and beautifully. It's like a big house with electrical circuits and all the windows lit up, and slowly, one by one, the circuits die till the house becomes dark. And to see a person who was so dynamic and so thinking and so brilliant with statistics and figures and speech, to lose their speech, to forget, not understand whether it's morning or night, whether it's breakfast time or dinner time, whether they've eaten or not, what language to speak in it, until now he can't do anything at all. So I feel very strange. We were just speaking earlier, and I don't know whether to say he is or he was, because he is there, but George Fernandez is not there.
writing this book was letting go of the many feelings that you feel right now?
Well, it's easier to share. At that point of time, there was nobody to share it with. And I felt that this was a universal enough feeling that it deserved to be shared. Because there are many people who go through this and they don't speak about it. Especially in our country, some ailments are talked of publicly, but mostly anything to do with the degeneration of the brain, mental health, neurological problems, nobody really wants to talk about it. We kind of keep family things hidden, but he's not a man with a family. For him, his country and his people were his family. So I just felt it needed to be shared because so many people ask me all the time, how is he? And I thought it needed to be shared.
You write, books are created for a reason. They help create a new order, a clearer design in which to fit your own experiences and beliefs. And you write about your favorite books. So this is going to be my last question to you before we open out the questions to the audiences. Because the books you mentioned and the books you like are worth mentioning because each of those books are very special and very powerful human stories. So Marcel Proust's Remembrance of Things Past, George Orwell's 1984, Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, Gunter Grass, The Tin Drum, Kiran Nagarkar, Cuckold, Joseph Heller, Catch-22, Frank McCourt, Angela's Ashes, and John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. You know, all human stories, the story of survival. And your story is the story of survival for those who watch. But of the little I know you, the little we spoke, is a story of being. You know, it's for everyone, oh, here's a survivor, here is a brave woman, he's a fighter. But very few see it from inside and say, here is a person who is who she is.
You talk about how I appear to be.
But in the whole process, you were just being who you are, right? So in each of these books, was there a particular message or a particular thing that really struck with you and remained, which made you list these books?
Well, I would say many things. My love of literature made all these books powerful writing. Simone de Beauvoir taught me about how a woman must keep her autonomy, no matter how close she is to man, woman, child, anything. Angela's Ashes was a wonderful story, Pulitzer Prize winner, of an Irish family surviving the war through utter poverty, but doing it written with so much humor. I've never seen poverty written about with so much humor, and showing how they finally survive all that and go to the US. Grapes of Wrath described poverty in the United States and how a family has to face that and go through it with lots of universal understanding brought out. The other one, George Orwell, because every now and then we remember it and we see, gosh, what he said was so true. In fact, a couple of my chapters here are about the actual year 1984 and what I had to go through with deal with all the killing of the Sikhs and how one had to take care of them and run the camp and see the kind of slaughter that went down. It was very 1984. So I don't know, maybe the main thing was, I suppose, the humanity, and to a large extent, Tin Drum also, very interesting humor. The World According to Garp, was that mentioned?
I believe so.
Yeah, it was. Because I also quote something about the undertone.
Yes, The World According to Garp, you specifically mentioned.
The World According to Garp by John Irving is a very interesting story about feminism, about the love of writing, and about very interesting things like death of a child and how that death is perceived as an ominous thing going to happen. So I just found a lot of these things very interesting as literary and human situations, put all these subjects put together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed reading the book. I'm going to go back and read it again and again. The first time I read it, I was like, I don't know how to perceive it. Then I went back and read it again. And then all the nuances flew in. So you must read the book to see the stories of boarding school in London, and then her time as a child in Tokyo, and the soba noodles, and the time in Rangoon. That's why I said, you must write the journeys of Jaya. And write
I don't want to bore everybody.
We're now going to open the floor for questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and don't bring a microphone.
Good evening, ma'am. Absolutely delighted. I want to share that my college growing years had memories of Dastakar. I still have that leather rectangular bags used to sell. But I must also confess, I joined the military and I was really broken when the infamous or famous Barak missile deal went through. And also sorry to say, having George sir as a defense minister, the coffin deal went through. I think, if I'm not mistaken, another Malayali, Matthew Samuel, was the one who wrote a big piece, and I always wanted to remember Jaya Jaitly as a person with, somebody with an artistic mind, but he changed my perception, and I actually came to change that because that was the memory, and we didn't read much about it because it's been back in, there's not much on news, it's not covered, but I want to put it on rest as to where we are on that, because if I remember, he said there were enough videotapes to prove that, though India is still gone with Barak missiles on, to prove that whatever was going on was right. So does that clarify in your book? I really want to put it to rest.
No, didn't want to get into George Saab and the Defense Ministry and their decisions, because neither did I know, nor is that my concern, and that was not my politics. I was very far away from all that. But I would like to say that, and everybody knows, at least it's been published often enough, that the CBI cleared every case which was an actual decision. There were lots of things in Telka which were the bogus ones, which is the concocted stuff. But everywhere in their conversations where they discussed an actual deal, they found either the deals were done during Mulayam Singh's time and were over with, not George Saab's decisions at all, or some things, the decisions had not been taken as yet. And during George Saab's time, every decision that was above 75 crore, he had ordered it should go to the CBC and CA vigilance or something. So he was absolutely clear and clean about any decisions that he had taken or was likely to take. Even on the coffin, the CBI came out clearly saying there was no such thing. It never reached the minister. Some junior officer, colonel at some level, made the mistake. In fact, they wrote, when they were dictating some order, they wrote kg instead of gauge. The metal sheeting of the coffin, casket actually, had to be 15 gauge. But the steno, not hearing or not knowing the word gauge, wrote kg. And because it didn't come at 15 kg weight, the whole thing went out of here. And of course, George Saab was the subject of attack anyway. So it got onto his head. And it really troubled him. And as soon as the new government came in, the first letter he wrote to Manmohan Singh was, now you have all the facts with you, please go in and clear it. Within 2 weeks, all the papers, all the files are with you, say what happened. Nobody did. But the CBI went through it, and the CBI, when the note came out, the news item, it was just a teeny bit of news. It's always headlines against you, but when it's okay, it's very small. So that's what happened.
The Good news is always small.
Always small.
Yes.
Good news is bad news for the media.
Yeah, will you please pass the microphone to...
By the way, Matthew Samuel, in this never-ending court case of mine, he is the final and the most important witness according to the CBI. They have had 47 witnesses so far who have not produced a thing against me. There's not a paper, not a sentence, not an accusation, no, nothing. Matthew Samuel, who's supposed to be the crucial person who filmed all this, for 3 years, 35 times he's been given dates in court. He has come 4 times. He doesn't come. And what are his excuses? I must share with you because he shares it with the court. Piles, constipation, diabetic trouble, mother sick, or he has to go to Dubai, or he has to go for training to the US. So he ranges between the United States and bed, but he never comes to court.
I have a question. Okay.
Could you please keep your microphone closer?
Hello. Yes.
Can you
My
turn it
name
on?
is Rajesh Grover, and well, you know very well that
We
today
cannot
another
hear
Modi.
you. Could you please turn
Yeah.
on your...
Sorry. I'm not a TV actor or anything.
So, this is new for me. But I feel the question is pertinent for all. And you know, another Modi is in the news these days, and you know what for. So while driving here and knowing a little about your book, I wanted to ask you that as things appear today, India does seem to have all the, you might call it, all the trappings of a modern society. It has institutions, it has the parliament, it has the judiciary and whatnot. But it is pretty dismaying to hear that none of these can be expected to do an objective job. Either they are all ED or CBI or whoever, and whichever political party, either they are themselves quite on the wrong side, or at least they are willing to go by any decisions that politicians take, whatever they might be, good or bad. And even activists like Anna Hazare haven't made a dent. This lok whatever, I mean, it's become a farce now, quite. And in a situation like this, I would like to ask you that, you know, corruption is, to me, understandable. As long as there is human greed, there will be corruption. But these checks and measures, the controls that are needed to stop it, are they ever going to work in India? The way I see it, it looks like dead end.
Well, I think on a larger picture, India is such a vast country with so many layers and layers of social structures and cultural thought that to get anything moving and changing on a mass scale takes a lot of time. I do believe that a lot of the corruption is attempting to be corrected by a lot of this electronic and online stuff. They keep saying, and I think to a large extent it's true, that if you have somebody online, you don't have to do Bhaibandi. You just click it on and that's it, and there is no human being you have to hold your hands in front of. But you still have municipalities and layers of corruption that remain unchanged. And I think those structures are going to take time to change, because we also, one layer is that we are a very subservient society. We are always willing to do Ji Hazuri because we've done it so long. To the British and to anybody who wants to rule us, we bow and we think of survival as the first thing before we think of integrity or honesty or holding our head up. People want to, in a situation of job insecurity, people would rather keep their job than lose it by standing up and facing your boss. There are so many layers of things that it will take a lot of technical, inspirational and integrity-ridden leadership to be able to actually make it happen. Today I know in Delhi that people who are made to come to work on time and work all day and be honest are actually working against this government because they don't want that. There's a lot of vested interest also. I'm not saying this government is perfect, but at least there is a watch on corruption, and I don't think anyone can say that ministries are corrupt. Institutions have been, even during the demonetization. Who was really caught out? The banks. So we never really thought about the bank manager being corrupt, but they are. At every level we are corrupt, and who's going to change it? Even something so simple as Swachh Bharat. I am amazed at how many people still throw kooda. We just don't care about throwing a piece of paper or throwing a plastic bottle. We don't want to keep our nearby area clean. In middle class and upper class societies, yes, maybe. Or maybe we can afford to have. In Banaras, people are not willing to pay 1 rupee a day, 30 rupees a month to have the kooda wala take their kooda away. They'll say, nahi, hum phek denge, paisa nahi dena. Then they'll throw it on the road. The municipality will come. They will clean it up, and 2 hours later the kooda is there again and the cows are eating that plastic. When are we going to learn? Each one of us. I don't know why we go on blaming governments and politicians and people. We are the ones who make them. We are part of them, and if the police are corrupt, they come from our society. The CBI are only police with a big fancy name. So some people are good and some people are not. Same everywhere.
We'll take the 2 last questions. So Abhijay, yes.
Thank you for the very enlightening talk, ma'am. It was wonderful to listen to your conversation, and I'm really looking forward to read the book. 2 very short questions, one in the realm of public life and one slightly in the realm of your private life. With regard to the realm of public life, how was it to be a campaigner in the opposition most of the time, raising issues, reading literature, talking about high ideals, and then finding yourself in government as an ally? As you said that you were often tasked to defend the NDA, the Samta Party, and the ruling party. So how was that transition? Did you feel that when you're in government, things are different much different from when you see things from across the aisle? And when that you are in power, not everything is in your hand. How was that experience? The second short question would be, many of the powerful women in Indian politics have also had a powerful male companion. For example, MGR and Jaya Jaitly, or Kanshiram and Mayawati. So, is it so, and of course yourself and George Fernandez in some ways, is it so that strong women are of course strong for their own merit and for their own struggles, but gain very significantly also from a stronger male companion? Or what is your take on this kind of an analysis with regard to the strength of women and their independence in Indian politics? Thank you.
2 very interesting questions. The first one about being outside government and in the opposition and otherwise being near government. I would say for everybody, including Mr. Rahul Gandhi today, it is very easy to be in the opposition and to shout and scream and criticize every day and find smart remarks to do so. And it's very miserable being in government because there's so much you want to do and so little you can do. Because, and the Prime Minister Modi describes it very well. He said, "Pata nahi kaun si slow train mein hamare sare file baithte hain." Files move from one table in one room to the other in a month. George Saab had to send a whole lot of officers to Siachen to see for themselves how difficult it is to be without snowmobiles and how more people die falling into crevasses in the snow than from shooting across the border. So this is the ways of the bureaucracy, which is terrible, and I wish we would have administrative reform, end the IAS, have lateral entries, and just change the whole structure of how we do our administration. But of course, we don't want it to be like America, where you have Trump bringing in his people who will do only what he says, and then another person bringing in only what they say. So we have to find a medium of our own. It's really frustrating and disappointing in government that you can't get enough done. And as I say, not only is the file moving system slow, a lot of bureaucrats don't want to do anything because then they have to deliver. So they will do this yes minister business and otherwise just slow down files. About a male companion, now companion, it defines how you use the word. Companion does not mean anything immoral. A companion can be a male mentor, a promoter, Because after all, if you're a man being promoted by a man, the companion word doesn't come in. This is what I'm saying. When you really want to be equal in your mind, then it should not matter whether the person is a male or a female. It will be guru and shishya, it will be colleague, it will be apprentice, it will be disciple, it will be junior colleague. But when it's a woman, it becomes colleague, companion and mistress and girlfriend and whatnot. Why does that happen? With MGR, yes, she was a beautiful film star. He saw something in her, which obviously she had and which she proved. And I think her aggression among males was because she didn't like that male domination and exploitation she felt when she was with him. Mayawati had a capacity which everyone recognized in Parliament. So if he promoted her, he believed in her. Again, my question is, if she was a man, would anyone have asked this question? Mamta Banerjee doesn't have a promoter. So it really depends on actually our mindset. Give a woman a chance. Don't look at her as somebody being promoted by someone else. Whoever that person may be, woman or man, if she's capable, she's getting promoted. And if she's not capable, she'll flop.
Some people say that Mr. Kejriwal is where he is because he is in Delhi and the whole media lies there. And another thing I would like to, you can give, we have lots of youngsters here who may aspire to be a politician like you in future. So can you give them some tips on using media for their favor?
Make the media run after you, don't run after them. For one thing, I don't think one should give them that much importance. Live your life and do what you believe in. If what you're doing is worthwhile, the media should notice. And if the people notice you, the media will. If the people don't and only the media does, then you're a very short-lived celebrity. Today also, unfortunately, a little side comment, the media themselves thinks they are celebrities. I don't know if they make celebrities, they make murgas and monkeys out of people. Most times they bring you into a studio to nacho and fight with each other and they become the conquerors. So I don't know. I have very little time for this media and I never felt a celebrity from being in the media. I would have lots of people comment, aapko dekha hai kahin, hum aapko media mein dekhte hain. Nice comments come when people say, oh, when you come, the whole family likes to watch, because you don't shout and fight, you say what you want to work clearly. That's not what most politicians like to do. They want to act as if the whole world is watching them and therefore they are the biggest actors. Today, unfortunately, many people think they can become big politicians by going on TV. So everyone likes to be spokespersons of parties so that they can be in the TV studios every evening. Some people like say Meenakshi Lekhi or somebody who is a lawyer, who became a spokesperson, who has now become an MP, was always on TV. Shazia Ilmi, another one. Very personable TV personalities, used to the TV, very articulate, and then they achieve. So they think that TV is the way. When I became a spokesperson, it was really self-appointed because nobody in the party cared for it. The Bihar politicians wanted to be in Bihar fighting elections and worrying about all of that. Suddenly TV channels came and every party had spokespersons and press conferences, and our party, poor thing, never thought about all this. Suddenly TV would come to, I was the only one there. I looked over my shoulder to see kaun kisko niyukt karega, who is the spokesperson, and found nobody around, nobody interested. So I would have to give a statement. So it just became that I became the spokesperson. So I got known at a time when the NDA came to power for the first time. So probably it was an important time, but just by chance.
So we're going to take one last question. I think there was yes. Would you take the mic to the girl in the red sweater, please? Thank you.
Good evening. Just to extend on the question...
Could you please keep your microphone close?
Just to extend on the question that the last gentleman asked, for girls who are aspiring to be in politics, given we have a lot of stigma attached with anything women get into, if they're successful, there's a story that's cooked up. If they're not successful, then there's some other story that's cooked up. what are the 2 or 3 things, or even if it's one major thing that they need to be prepared for or keep in mind when they get into it? And how do you make that balance between your own ethics and morality and make your way forge ahead?
Well, ethics and morality is very important. You have to draw your own lines. I would say that for the first thing you mentioned, don't worry about stigma. If you believe and your conscience is right, never mind what people say. People are going to say something anyway. I would say at the end of it all, my answer is write a book. Show it. Show what you are and what was the stigma and how you deal with it. If my book gives strength to some young girls, good. If it doesn't, at least the story. But I find today a lot of young women in politics who are serious, who are educated, who keep their focus right, and who work hard. And they work within their own system of morality, of integrity, and of doing the right thing. And more, I think public pressure will bring out the right thing. I do have hope and optimism in human society as such. There are always people who must do good in order to fight the people who do wrong. So nobody doing good should back off. So it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man, do what you believe in and be confident in what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jaya Ji. Thank you very much. Thank you on behalf. I know you have a question. It's getting chilly, so we have 2 minutes before 6, so I'm going to allow you to ask that question. If you could please keep it short.
Good evening, ma'am. You just mentioned about the helplessness of a person in power. Like you told that Mr. Modi, sometimes he told that all the files are in slow train or something like that. We, as common people, we are helpless to understand how a person in power can be so helpless. Mr. Fernandez ever mentioned this kind of helplessness with you? That, see Jaya, I'm in power, I'm a defense minister right now, but we are really sorry that all those kind of eruptions took place during Mulayam Singh Yadav's regime, and I can't do anything.
No, he never thought he couldn't do anything. He did many things, and that's why he got hit. And because they couldn't quite hit him, they hit me instead. It's very clear to me that that's what happened, because the very first day he stepped in to the defense ministry, he set up complaint boxes at every entry gate, in which he said that as long as you give a complaint which has a name and an address and not anonymous, the key for these boxes is in my office, and I will see to every complaint of corruption. Any time in Parliament corruption was raised, somebody raised something, there was a question about Bofors. He sent for the Bofors file because it was not about looking into the whole Bofors gapla, it was about getting spare parts for the Bofors guns which were rotting without spare parts. So when he looked at that, there was a big hangama. Usually what happened was defense land, Navy, Army, Air Force, who had land or properties owned privately, those people wanted their private properties back, and they were willing to pay bribes for individual decisions to get those properties back. So when they asked him and offered bribes for that, he said, let us have a system whereby from 1947 to now, in stages, we will start slowly releasing properties, no matter whose they are. Because if we have built our own properties and colonies for people to live, we have no business to occupy private people's houses. But we will not do it for somebody who's asked yesterday. We will start from 1947 and go slowly downward. These are the kind of actions he took. And as I said, any decision above 75 crore, 2 or 3 major institutions had to check it. And he did that from Rajiv Gandhi's time to his own time. And that's what scared people. It scared people that, oh, now Rajiv Gandhi's time decisions will be looked into. Not that George Fernandez was going to get caught. So they had to stop him. And all this was, I believe, the Telka thing was to stop a person who was fighting corruption.
Thank you, everybody. Jayaji's books are available here for purchase, so please do get a copy and get it signed.
I find it very silly to sign books. I wish you'd read it and then tell me what you feel and then I'll sign.
You have to come back again for that.
Right. It's such a nice evening and such a nice audience. I'm happy to come back.
I want to thank all of you. I want to thank you, Jayaji. I have personally learned so much from reading the book, from meeting you. Thank you. Once again, thank you.
Thank you, Jayaji. That was certainly an intriguing session, and I'm sure we have a lot to take home today. I would like to thank Group of Publications for associating with us, and I now request Ms. Nazia Izzuddin to present a memento to Jayaji as a token of our gratitude.